Welcome to the UXI podcast series. I'm Andri, and as we've done in the past, we want to share some important information or useful information with specifically parents, and then for those players who want to spend extra time learning about rugby. I've got with me all the way from I want to say the UK, but staying in Ireland at the moment, spent some time in France as well, so well-travelled rugby man, Tom Painter. He is a mental skills and performance coach. And today we're going to talk about the very often neglected skill of mental performance. So Tom, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's really good to be here, Andre. Thanks. Yeah.
Don't you, just maybe as an introduction, want to tell us what you do and what your approach is as a mental skills coach? I don't think many people always understand what that means. You, a conditioning coach chases a player around the field. A rugby coach teaches them how to catch and pass. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a great way of putting it, because if we look at, you said conditioning coach, we look at it all as physical, tactical, technical, and mental as the four components of performance. So really what my role is to be the coach for the mental piece. So instead of giving a gym program as an S&C coach, we're talking about developing habits, learning skills, and repeating processes with a coach to kind of clarify and frame that thinking. And it's essentially about working with an individual so that they can reflect, but yeah, mainly develop specific skills through repetition and your usual way of learning and developing anything, like strengthening a muscle, so that both off the field and on the field we can perform better. And I think that speaks to what you said about my approach. So my approach is definitely a happy person is a successful player. So I take a very well-being focused, holistic approach. We look at a lot of mindfulness, but we really look at those skills as a way simply to get to the start line with a really nice, calm inner space and a lot of clarity there. Yeah.
Okay, so if you had to summarize mental skills, you know, as a couple of components or a list, what would they be? What would you look at to create that mental well-being?
So I think, I mean, there are, I would suppose, some top-line habits that we talk about, or practices in the mindset. So looking at self-awareness, communication, self-regulated learning. But then within performance and the mental skills, we're talking about goal setting, the use of imagery and visualization, how you apply self-talk, how you can regulate your emotion up or down as is required by your performance. And you know what the work looks like on that front is really sketching out what to do, looking at why we might need to do it, planning for situations, and then just using it, using it in practice, honing it with a coach like me, so that when we come to that performance, you have a specific routine of things to do to facilitate your performance.
Yeah. So in South Africa, there's this word that we used a lot when I was a kid growing up. It was the word guts. It was that, like, that fortitude to push through and, perform under pressure. And I think the accepted belief is that you're either born with it or not. You're like you either a terrier or you a chihuahua. That's how you're born, and you will act depending on what your genes are. Even though mentally there's a lot you can change and work on.
Definitely.
As a mental coach, what is the truth? How does it actually work?
I mean, I think you're dead right. I mean, in the last 20 so years, sports psychology has developed so much from really that perception. I think that's really why mental skills came about, is exactly this perception. It's a challenge to, okay, are people just born like that, or are they not? And I mean, for me, it's just always been very obvious that you can improve the way you think, or you can change the way you think. That's really what we're talking about, isn't it? It's what are you specifically saying to yourself? What are you focusing yourself on? And just a deliberate reaching into that stuff rather than letting it happen. And I think the perception of this as a trait just comes from that passivity that we usually use around these sorts of things. I hope I'm going to respond well in that situation, rather than, no, I can, because I understand the way my attention works, I'm going to do specific things to change how that goes, change how the performance works for me. And I think that's the real difference. For me, they're skills. They're definitely skills. If you're looking at reflecting on your own performance or how you're talking to yourself in self-talk, that's the thing you have to do. That's a deliberate thing you set in motion. And plenty of evidence and research is there that these things are impactful on both performance and emotion. So yeah, for me, I think it's outdated to look at it that way, and I think it's harmful as well. I think it's harmful especially for younger athletes who then get into quite fixed mindset about this.
Yeah, and when I started studying behavioral psychology, performance psychology more, I think the most fascinating concept for me was the concept of neuroplasticity, where the physical structure of your brain changes based on how you think and then how you apply that thinking. So you can change who you are depending on how you think, what you pay attention to, as you mentioned. It is true, though, that there might be a bigger lag between certain players, just purely based on the fact that you might have done something in a certain way for so long that the channels in your brain are just so strong that it's really difficult to break away from them. So that does happen. How do you change that in a player?
Well, I think so. I mean, that really is a great intro for someone like myself, or you kind of having that outside person to help you reflect on that situation and where you are at. I think the key thing there is that self-awareness of it, and that facilitated self-awareness. It's incredibly hard to change behavior, but the first part of any of that has to be the recognition of a behavior that's not useful for you. And I think sometimes that takes somebody else, working with somebody else. But I think once we get to that position where we see there's an issue, I have a barrier, which is that every time I step up to a goal kick, I envisage myself missing it. If there's that self-awareness, then it's then just about putting in specific process and adhering to that process. Coming up with a good plan to replace that image, to change how we're thinking about that, and then just to do it. And I guess the doing of it is quite challenging, because when you're under pressure, you will default to your old habits. So yeah, it takes quite a lot of effort, and it helps to have a coach there to really plot out, okay, during this training session, we're going to do this. Did we do it? So you start that behavior changing process. But I think very quickly, actually, I think you can sweep away unhelpful behavior quite quickly by going at it, like changing any habit, stopping smoking, eating less. It's just deliberate action. But that can be easier said than done, unless I think you have somebody else.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the most important first step is the self-awareness, to be able to admit and say, listen, there's something wrong here. I'm not getting what I want because there's something that I'm not doing right. And that might start with a thought pattern or a belief system.
Yeah, definitely.
So in general, not necessarily just referring to specific rugby performance, can you, especially in young men, can you alter the way you approach things in light of motivation, passion, confidence? Are these approaches to life that you can alter with the development of proper mental skills?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's, all of this is about where we talked about attention as well, right? And all of it is going to be about where we are putting that attention. And I think it's really this piece about deliberate action. So when we have a plan to change a behavior or something, if we started, for example, you said about motivation and mindset, if there's a routine there in the morning where what we're really doing is putting our attention on the reasons why we do something, or that image at the end of the line, which is our dream image. I don't think any of the content of those thoughts changes or those images changes. It's actually about the deliberate changing of where you're putting your attention. So in your example, it would just be about saying, right, let's draw out what your resources are. Let's look at what your motivation is, and more importantly, focus on it. Because day to day it's just about replacing that deficiency. That day to day we just don't look at that stuff. And I think that's the key. So the mental skill there would be that self-awareness piece, the reflection, and I think that's all it is. Most of this stuff is stuff we all know how to do. It's about making sure we do it, and do it in a way that's really got that single focus of like, what goal are we trying to achieve?
And I think the irony is, and it's maybe a good thing to reframe, that if you're a young player and you grew up in your house always blaming coaches, complaining about the ref.
Yep.
The parents supported that view, said, yeah, the ref was terrible, that's why you lost, or the coach doesn't know what he's doing.
Yep.
That's probably the first place to start if you're a parent-son relationship in sport.
100%. I mean, the single best belief you can possess a young athlete of, in my mind, or way of thinking, is to really, really get in there about what you control and what you don't. I think whether it's in a performance or throughout your development as a performer, an early appreciation of where I put my mental bandwidth relative to my level of control on it, so that focus back onto the process, the internal focus about everything that I can do, separating from outcomes, but especially getting rid of that habit of attributing outcomes that matter to you to the stuff you don't control. Because autonomy is, what in every conception of basic human needs, right? Autonomy is one of the keys. So if we're always talking about the other reasons we didn't succeed apart from what we did, we're really just a passenger in the whole thing. We're not a pilot.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word bandwidth, as in Wi-Fi, internet, any other information, upload, download. You've only got so much width to send or receive information.
Yep.
And if you spend that width on blaming external factors, you physically can't take control of the things that you can control, because you're using up that space on things that are out of your control. So I've got a it's a lesson or a rule that I teach my kids with sport, is the coach is always right even when they're wrong. And we've had instances where we don't agree with team selections, the way they get used in whichever sport they were playing, or even the referee is always right even when they're wrong. Bad calls happen, games don't always end up the way you want them to because of a couple of decisions. You can't change it.
No.
And you can't change a coach's decision. You can't choose a team for them. They will always make the call based on what they think is right, even if you don't feel that they are wrong. Or 2 or 3 parents don't agree with them. If your view can be the coach is always right even if it's wrong, then you change your focus on what can I do to change his mind. And that's on field. It's 100% effort and on field.
Completely. I talk about, both in a team and an individual, you just talk about a sailing analogy. Always about a boat. All we can do is make the boat better in the weather. We can't change the sea state, we can't change the weather. We can plan a journey and know how we operate the boat, and we can take the boat into harbour and we can improve parts of it, but we can't actually manipulate or change anything else. So I think that internal focus to say, and that's what I say to parents the whole time, or coaches, praise effort because it's controllable. Take the praise away from outcome. Always remove outcome from the situation, so that children can feel that what good looks like is something that they can attain all the time if they choose it. And I think that would be the most important thing for me, for sure. You can only manage how the boat works, and actually you should only be focused on that, because you don't change the rest of it.
Great. And I mean, a conditioning coach would tell a player to increase reps or spend time on a spinning bike, rowing machine if they've got specific work-ons or skills they need to train. As a mental skills coach, to end off with, give a couple of work-ons and practices that players should be spending time on that will make them stronger mental players. Off the bat, 100% journaling is probably the most. Writing things down, putting your development and your thoughts, getting them out there onto paper, and as a learning tool and as a monitoring tool, and just getting in control of your development, that would be absolutely massive for me. So easy reflective journaling after a training session, after a performance, or just generally taking 30 minutes on a Monday just to scribble down, why do I want to do this, or just anything about your journey. I think really the content doesn't matter. But the process around more performative stuff would be, firstly, in that writing, maybe you could uncover some barriers. You could imagine a specific issue that you're having. With a mental skills coach, what we then do is we'd say, it's not one size fits all, right? So it's about learning about how that
person would navigate this. They might be much more talkative to themselves than they are visual. So you'd say, okay, well, if you're having this problem in this situation and it seems like self-talk is a thing that's really big for you, then let's do something in that department. So plan a cue for a moment that you know is going to occur, so that, and commit to it, right? So when you're in that moment, you just go, I'm doing this, and it's a process. Because when our bandwidth is limited, we can't be thinking about what to do in that moment. So pre-planning it and saying, look, in this game, I'm going to miss a tackle. Realistically, there's going to be something, the team might concede a try. And then just if-then planning. So understanding the mental skills and their impact on you and your performance, and saying, okay, well, at that moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 mindful breaths. Because what that's doing is it's taking my attention off whatever I'm annoyed about and putting it on me in my breathing. Or in that situation, I'm going to have a little cue for myself, which is just going to return me to something that's really important in my performance, or something that's really important in my motivational state. So I think what to do is to learn skills, practice skills. So how are you talking to yourself? Imagining vivid images that help you, or recollecting good performances that inspire you. And then just planning them and making them happen. Just insisting on the doing of it. It's like any habit. It's the actual rolling out of adherence to a program over time is what will change it.
Yeah. And I think for parents and coaches, it's very important to realize that every single young player will have a story that they're telling themselves all the time. There's a belief system and a self-talk that we can either assist with in improving or make worse. So, and I know at this level, a lot of these players, most of them actually have negative self-talk. Right. It's just, I think it's the way the world works. So by shifting focus to a coach and shifting focus to a referee, or external circumstances, you drop the ball because it was wet. It doesn't help that self-talk. So what's the best thing we can do in that case?
So I think it's being aware of your attributive style, right? Football managers are actually great, and it's not actually a bad thing to do in general for your own performance. Like sometimes it is kind of easy. I don't saying lie to yourself, but like if you've had a hard time, you find football managers, if they've lost, they'll go, it was the ref, it was this, it was that bad decision. But if they win, they go, we played really well, we did that. So I think it's understanding how you can wash that stuff away. But I just think it's about committing to working with yourself in a positive way. So insisting, like we said, that I've got a cue phrase, or I've got something that actually means something to me, and knowing that your thinking and all of that stuff is opinionated and it's negative maybe because of the situation. It's just understanding that and going, right, I'm going to deliberately say this at this point, or say it all the time. And if you just commit to that kind of action, then you'll start to see the needle move. I think maybe that's an answer to your question.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah.
All right, Tom, any last thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess if there's a sort of like parent kind of coaching angle to this, I'd just say it's so massively important to understand the hygiene in a player, the internal hygiene of what they're saying to themselves, how they're thinking. And if you can have an awareness of how attention works in the environment you create around a young player, or in your home with an athlete who's aspiring to be, that's the best thing you can do for them, and it's absolutely massive. So don't talk about things you can't control. Focus on that praise, effort, and understand that language is infectious. And if you can work on positive process-based language, you give everyone who's in your environment, especially young people who are actually looking up to you for an example, I think that's key. Yeah.
Great. So we believe that that helped you just gain some insight into the importance of mental performance skills, and how to change self-talk, how to focus on the right things, focus on inputs rather than outputs. We will continually share podcasts like this to just give you some more insights as to how we run our process, how we run the program at UXI. Any questions, any feedback, you're welcome to send us a message. Until next time.